This is the Dell Inspiron 15-3511, Dell's revised entry-level core-based laptop for 2021. It replaces the Dell Inspiron 15-3501, which we looked at last year, and like that machine features the same Tiger Lake based processor range, in this case the i3-1115G4. The range is available with other options from Celeron to i7, although here in the UK only the i3, i5 and i7 are available. Really, compared to the 3501, this isn't a machine that adds, this is a system that takes away. Most notably, when you first see the system, is that you have a thinner bezel all the way around, particularly at the chin, and the machine is actually 13mm, almost 14mm less deep, but also 5mm narrower due to reductions in these bezels, and a millimetre less thick. While these form factor improvements are of course welcome, other aspects of the machine have also seen some changes, and particularly some removal of features, which may disappoint some users. The chassis design now as well, for 2021, is coloured in what Dell call carbon black. To be honest, it's more of a dark grey, and one thing I have noticed is this finish has you can possibly see it here, it seems to like just picking up discoloration from sort of greasy hands. You can really see where the machine has been handled. The finish of it actually to the feel is quite nice, but it's certainly noticeable. You can see where it's been held. Looking inside, and again we can see how those bezels have been thinned, particularly at the bottom here. We no longer even have room for the Dell logo, which used to be embossed into this bottom chin of the panel, and it feels like a lot of the styling of the machine kind of follows the 5510, which sits above this in the Dell range. At the left side of the laptop now, and first of all we can see one of the areas where Dell have actually taken away relative to the 3501 that this replaces. On the 3501 we had a hinged Ethernet port, and that has completely gone. We have no Ethernet options, so if you want to connect this to a wired network, you are going to be using a USB-A adapter. Disappointingly as well, the HDMI port remains only HDMI 1.4, not 2.0, meaning we only have 1080p support. You may find there is 4K support at 30Hz, but Dell state only 1080p is supported and there are no 4K output options in the specifications. Otherwise we have our power connector, LED, and these two ports are both USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports offering 5 gigabit per second transfer speeds. We can also see that this has adopted the style of hinge and bottom of screen that we see on the 5510 and other Dell models, so a less squared off design with the lid, and instead one which, as you rotate it, lifts the base of the unit to assist in airflow. And that's actually all there is for the ports, and you're probably sat there thinking, well, where's the USB-C? And there isn't any. If you have a version of this machine with an NVIDIA graphics card, then they get a USB-C port. They also get DDR4 3200 RAM for some reason, but all the UK models that we get are without that NVIDIA graphics. If you don't have the NVIDIA graphics, you get no USB-C and you get DDR4 2666 RAM. I mean, obviously Dell are doing this to segment against their 5000 series and to give more differentiation there, but really they aren't competing with other people. You know, at this price point for this specification machine, you should be getting the full DDR4 3200 speed, and you should be getting a USB-C port, because these are pretty standard features these days. Even if it doesn't do power delivery and DisplayPort through it, you know, these should be there. Speaking of airflow, and we have a wide vent on the back of the laptop here. However, there is only a single fan on this side, which blows through a heatsink located around here. This then exhausts through this section here at the base of the screen, so it is blowing onto this little plastic section. I didn't notice any excessive heat build up here, although I haven't tried touching this portion of the screen whilst gaming, but in general usage haven't noticed any problems. Looking at the right hand side, and again we can see something which has been taken away relative to the 3501, and we have lost the security cable lock, which was previously located here. In its place is the headphone jack, which used to be on the left hand side. We also have a USB 2 port, not even USB 3, and an SD card slot. Opening up and looking inside the machine at our input devices, and again it becomes quite noticeable how fingerprinty this plastic can be, but the first thing that actually you can see is we have quite a big touchpad. Despite the laptop shrinking in overall footprint, this is 10mm wider than on its predecessor, the 3501, and the same depth at 80mm, so quite a nice large touchpad, feels absolutely fine to use, and supports the touchpad customization through settings rather than separate controls. The keyboard is also really standard fare for Dell. It is this chiclet design which is integrated into the palm rest, so if you have keyboard issues you'll be replacing the whole palm rest, which is pretty common with most laptops these days. Being a 15-inch machine, we have the numpad on the right hand side. However, really, again, this is very feature light. There is no backlighting on this model. I believe it is available in some regions, but here in the UK we do not get the option. Another area where this has been defeatured versus the 3501 is right here. UK models of the 3501 got a fingerprint sensor, and for the 3511 that has been deleted across all the models that we receive here. Once again, you can see in the specification documents that a fingerprint sensor is optional, so it may be available in your region, but if you're expecting keyboard backlighting and a fingerprint sensor, do check the specifications for what you're actually buying, because that is certainly not the case in all regions. Other than that though, the keyboard layout, as I've said in the past, I prefer to some of the other alternatives like HP. For UK English layout, Dell don't deviate too far and keep things fairly close to what you expect for a typical UK layout, rather than some hybrid sort of UK-US arrangement to fit their standardised cutouts. Looking at the screen, and this is really as you would expect in class and pretty much the same as the 3501 that this replaces, which means we have a 1080p WVA type panel. This has a maximum 220 nits of brightness and an NTSC 45% colour gamut and 400:1 contrast ratio. Being a WVA type panel, we will find that colour shift is not bad. Colours themselves also pretty reasonable. Looking at these pictures here, I've got no real objections with how the sample images look. It's not the brightest panel you'll ever find. In fact, the main thing I tend to find, this actually has a pretty good minimum brightness. Some systems that I use, the maximum brightness is almost too much when you're using them in a dark sitting room or similar, and you almost sometimes wish they would go dimmer. This, certainly if you're using it outdoors, you would wish it would go brighter, but for indoor use day to day it is an acceptable screen, reasonable quality, reasonable viewing angles. If you get to really extreme viewing angles, then you'll start to lose contrast and get a bit of colour shift, but in front of it, slightly off centre, it's acceptable. You're not going to have any major issues with it. Now, one of the questions I'm always asked about is on battery life, and what we can see here is with the machine, so during this testing I've been running it off of the battery just so that the adapter isn't in shot, and currently with 94% remaining it is estimating over 10 hours of battery life. Now I'd expect with real usage this is going to drop down, but certainly I wouldn't think it was unreasonable to expect 6 or 7 hours from it. Interestingly, compared to the 3501, the battery is actually marginally smaller, coming in at 41 watt hours as opposed to 42. However, the machine is also 200 grams lighter approximately, depending on configuration, which is accounted for by that smaller battery and the smaller chassis overall. There is also in some regions the option of a larger 54 watt hour 4-cell battery, so do check again what the specifications of the machine are in your region. The laptop, as featured today, is currently for sale at Dell.com in the UK for £429, and this was purchased by ourselves for around this price. It was purchased for around this price by ourselves. This was not supplied by Dell, and as you can see here, this is the 11th gen Intel Core i3 1115G4 with 4GB of RAM, Windows 10 Home in S mode, and 128GB SSD. Otherwise, the hardware is really as it was on the 3501. We have that DDR4 memory locked to 2666 speeds, even though a 3200 module comes installed in the machine, and that 128GB SSD. Looking at shipping OS, this arrived with Windows 10 Home in S mode with the 20H2 version of Windows. If we look under the updates, we should see that we have not yet been offered Windows 11. However, I have tested this with the media creation tool and upgrading through that, which all worked flawlessly. I've just rolled it back to Windows 10 for this video. Otherwise, looking at pre-installed apps, because this is in S mode, we only get sort of the typical Dell Cinema Color, Mobile Connect, so on. We do get McAfee, however this only activates if you remove the machine from S mode, which of course you'll want to do if you want to run standard Windows applications outside of the Windows Store. And in my opinion, there's nothing egregious on here that would have me rushing to reinstall a clean version of Windows 10 onto the system, but I would personally be opting to take this out of S mode so that I can run standard applications on it. One area which is very nice about the 3511 is that we have strong upgradeability with a pair of DIMM slots, only one occupied as standard, a M2 2280 and 2.5-inch SATA bay, and also the option to upgrade the wireless card if you want to switch to Wi-Fi 6 at a later date. We do have a separate video showing the upgrade process in full for these components, so do check that out if you want to see more on that. So the real question in all of this is, should you consider the Dell Inspiron 153511? Compared to its predecessor, Dell have obviously focused on what they think the average user wants, which is reducing the overall footprint of the laptop, reducing the weight of it, and the size that it takes on the desk. That does come with some compromises though. The loss of an Ethernet port will impact some users and is not a positive, particularly when you don't have a USB-C port which can serve as a means of docking the laptop to a screen, Ethernet. You're going to be connecting individual cables, which is just a bit of a pain. The Inspirons have often not just been a good home choice, but also an entry-level office-based machine, and sometimes you do want Ethernet on those. But most users probably won't care and will probably appreciate the weight and size reduction that this gives them. The thing that really bothers me actually with the whole 2021 Dell 3000 series is got a bit stale. These core-based models don't have USB-C in 2021. They are still running DDR4 2666 MHz memory, even though they come installed with a 3200 module. They're limited in their speed. And the same can be said with the 3510 we looked at recently. It's running a 3 or 4 year old Braswell chip. There are newer chips available from Intel in those sectors, which they just are ignoring. And the 3515 is using Ryzen 3000 series chips when the 5000 and 4000 series have been available for some time. So would I buy it? Well, I did, to look at it today. It's not a bad system, but if you're willing to shop around for the money, 4 gigs of RAM and 128 gigabytes for £430 is just not great value for money. Dell are always doing price reductions, offers, and so on, so what you can find at the time of looking, and even in your region, may vary. If this was the model with the NVIDIA MX350 chip in it, USB-C, DDR3200, then actually I'd be giving it a bit of a solid recommendation, even if I thought the NVIDIA chip was a bit disappointing. But it's not. The UK models are really just a bit lacking. So whilst it's not a bad system, I would be looking for deals. I would be wanting to get this under the £400 mark. You know, if you're getting towards sort of 350, 380, you might be getting towards the truer value of this machine. If you shop around at somewhere like Currys or online, you will find higher specification machines for this money. But what I do like, there are positive aspects. Upgradeability of this machine, very good, very easy to get inside, upgrade that RAM, upgrade the SSD, upgrade the wireless card. The Dell machines tend to be pretty serviceable in terms of repairing most aspects of them. Part availability tends to be good. The screen is stuck in on these models, so that becomes a bit more difficult if you want to fix that. But if that is a consideration for you, it scores well in those regards. So overall I would say not a bad laptop, but one which Dell I feel have artificially hobbled to just give that differentiation between the 3000 and the 5000 series, whilst not really looking at what their competition is offering at this price point, and one which I would want to find at a better value price point than it currently is here in the UK. I hope you found this video interesting. Do let me know any questions in the comments below, hit like if you have, and hit subscribe if you'd like to see more videos as I post them. Thanks for watching.